Hi, I'm Barry Trott, Adult Services Director at the Williamsburg Regional Library. Summertime is a great time to read mysteries or crime fiction, so if you enjoy those sort of stories, we've got some good suggestions for you. Coming out this summer, we know we have Dick Francis has a new story, James Patterson, Daniel Silver, Reese Bowen, Donna Andrews, a whole host of folks have new books coming out, and of course if you want to get on the hold list for them, that's great, but you know, if you're number 155 on the hold list for the James Patterson, you might want some other books to tide you over till you get that one. So here's some great beach reading, sitting around the house reading, wherever you like to read. These are some great crime stories. When you look at crime fiction, you can really divide it into two pieces. You can say they're the police procedurals, they're the stories that take place in a police department, whether it's a big city, whether it's a small rural police department, and then there's the amateur detectives. There's subsets of all those different categories, but those are the two ways I'm going to break things down this afternoon, or whenever we're doing this, whenever you're watching. Start off with one of my favorite current police procedurals. This is by a Scandinavian writer from Sweden, Helene Tursten, and she writes a great series featuring a woman detective, Detective Inspector Huss in the Göteborg Police Department. They tell stories of fairly violent crimes. They're not easy stories. These are not cozy mysteries. They take place in somewhat of a dark atmosphere in the cold winters of Scandinavia. Good summer reading. It'll cool you off maybe when you're in the 90-degree weather and 95% humidity here in Williamsburg. But these are great stories, good characters, lots of interaction between the members of the police department. So they have a lot of sense of that, what goes on in an investigation, how the officers' lives affect their work. Tursten is married, or rather her Detective Inspector Huss is married to a chef. She has two teenage daughters. That raises a lot of issues in some of the stories as the daughters are growing up in what the mother sees as a somewhat chaotic world. But just good storytelling and an interesting setting. You don't get a lot of setting in Sweden, police procedurals or crime stories set in Sweden. Though Scandinavia is really a new hotbed for a lot of crime fiction. So if you've not tried any of those, you might like Helene Tursten. I'd certainly check her out. Moving a little further south and staying a little warmer perhaps, we go to Sicily, where you'll find the Andrea Camilleri series featuring Detective Inspector Montalbano of the Sicilian Police. If you've read Donna Leone and you like her mysteries set in Venice, again, that mix police procedurals with family stories and a lot of food, actually, eating and the whole rituals of food and gathering together as a community, I think are important parts of these stories. Voice of the Violin is one of the early ones in the Inspector Montalbano series. Like Donna Leone's Inspector Brunetti series, Camilleri talks about the lives of the policemen, a lot to do with the sort of corruption of the government and dealing with problems, the difficulties of being an honest and ethical policeman in a somewhat corrupt society. You know, if somebody can just pay off the big bosses, pay off the mayor, how do you be a policeman? So if you like those sort of stories that are a little bit more on the philosophical side perhaps, again with real strong characters, a great Mediterranean setting. So if you can't get over to the Mediterranean and lying on the beach at you know, one of those French resorts, take a look at these Inspector Montalbano by Andrea Camilleri. Voice of the Violin is a great one to start off with. For a little bit darker series, but great thriller. So if you're a James Patterson fan and you like that thrilling, edgy sort of crime stories where there's the action is moving fast, there's a lot of tension builds up over the course of the story. So if you like that in James Patterson and you know you're number 158 on the holds list for Patterson, you might want to check out Karl O'Connor's Mallory series. The first one that I've got here is Mallory's Oracle. Kate Mallory is a NYPD police officer. She was an orphan, living on the streets, having a real rough life. Things look bad for her, and she was taken in by and adopted by a New York City cop and his wife, who raised her, got her sort of on the straight and narrow, but she's got some trouble with relationships. She's not an easy woman to get to know. She doesn't make friends easily, and when her stepfather is investigating a crime and is knifed, killed. Kate takes it on herself to avenge his death, not only tracking down the criminal as you would in any story, but really taking almost personal vengeance. Kate's not the most friendly or warm of crime fiction characters. You're not going to be looking, this is not an Agatha Christie kind of book. So if you're an Agatha Christie reader, you might want to take a look at a few pages of this before you delve deeply into it. These are dark, very challenging in some ways stories about a detective who's not really a whole person. She's been wounded, she had a tough life, she's lost the only man in her life, her stepfather, who she really trusted and respected. And so Kate's a challenging person. She can be rough, she can be violent. You don't often find women police procedurals where the female cop is a tough woman like this. So, but these are great stories, great narration, they tell a wonderful tale, and so if you like police procedurals and you like that New York City setting, OConnor really captures the heat of the city. She really captures the feel of the grittiness, the language of New York City, and she really has an understanding for the police there. So I think these are great police procedurals if you like that. Another really wonderful police procedural setting story with a slightly different setting are John Burdette's Bangkok series. These are set in Thailand, featuring the Thai police. These are narrated in the first person. So our hero, who is Sonchai Jitplichip. He's an inspector with the Royal Thai Police. This is the second in the series. Bangkok 8 is the first one in the series. Bangkok is a fascinating city. Most of us are probably never going to get there. It's so different from anything you've probably ever read. So if you really want to delve into a story that's got great police procedurals, but in a completely different area, someplace you'd never think of going, with customs and traditions that are completely different from ours, you might like these. Again, if you like fast-paced, action-based stories. And if you like Daniel Silva, he's another one who has a new story coming out this summer. Daniel Silva's espionage mysteries set in Israel. If you like those, I think you might find a lot to like in Burdette's Bangkok stories. This one starts off with the death of a CIA agent in a somewhat dubious house of ill repute in Bangkok. And when the police are called in, they find that the connections between his death and drug dealing and the crime lords in Bangkok are very, very tightly woven. It's an in-depth, intricate story, very fast-paced, that'll carry you on to the end. This is the sort of thing you'll probably stay up all night reading. So if you like those quick-paced crime stories, Bangkok Tattoo, maybe you want to start with Bangkok 8, but I think you can start with this one as well. They give you a great introduction to a wonderful police procedural series. Another great police procedural that, for those of us in the States, offers a unique setting is Louise Penny's Armand Gamache series, Chief Inspector Gamache. Gamache works in Canada. He's an inspector with the Quebec Sûreté, and most of the stories take place in a small town. These are getting into what we might call the new cozies. So if you like those classic English mysteries that set in small towns and villages, you might want to try Louise Penny. Her stories are set in the village of Three Pines, a fictional village in Canada, in French-speaking Canada. She tells a lot about the lives of the inhabitants there, a real mixture of folks, folks who've lived there for a long time, as well as folks who've just moved to the area. In a sense, I think those of us who live in Williamsburg and the Williamsburg area can get a sense of what some of the maybe the tensions and the dynamics are as new people are moving into what has always been thought of as a small, quiet place. So we might find things to enjoy in here. This is Rule Against Murder, the fourth in the series. Still Life is the first one, and I think I'd recommend starting with Still Life. Our copy was checked out, so I couldn't bring that along to show you, but Still Life is the first one in the series. You definitely want to start at the beginning of this one. Gamache is a wonderful character. Again, Penny creates a really believable set of policemen and policewomen who are working together as a team to investigate crimes really across both the small town, the small village of Three Pines. This one takes place in a resort on a lake in Canada, a remote resort. It's almost like that stranded on a desert island kind of murder that you find in Agatha Christie. But if you like those stories with a smaller town setting, but still have she deals with contemporary issues. So these are not completely cozy or you know, soft, easy reads. She deals with some difficult issues, but she does it in a really good way. Most of the violence is off screen here, so these are not violent and bloody stories. People die, but the most of the interest of the book is in the characters and is in delving out or digging out that solution to the crime. So I think again, for a great police procedural series, a new one, Louise Penny's Armand Gamache series has a lot to offer. There's a lot of also, though, independent detectives, investigators who are not working in the police divisions, and I think those can offer for a lot of readers a great interest as well. They sometimes tie in particularly to the setting of the story is important. Historical mysteries are great examples of these because, of course, we didn't even have police departments till the 18th and early 19th centuries in England, so anybody who's writing a historical mystery set prior to that time is really working in the confines of some sort of amateur detective. And so there are a lot of great ones out there. One of my current favorites, and this is a new, this was a new one. It has the red dot on the back, so you know it's a new book. You'll find this on the new bookshelf. Is Arianna Franklin's series, that the Mistress of the Art of Death series. These are great stories. They tell about a woman who was, her name is Adelia Aguilar. She was raised in central Mediterranean era and was brought over to England during the reign of one of the Henrys. Let me see which Henry. Henry II. So these are fairly early setting for historical mysteries. But King Henry was looking for an investigator to address some of the problems he was having with deaths in his in London that were really potentially causing disruption in the community. So he sent to Salerno, where she lived, to get them to send over their best forensic investigator. Adelia, unusually for a woman of the period, studied medicine, and she's got a real sense for being able to ferret out the crimes by studying the bodies. Of course, you know, forensic, if you like Patricia Cornwell, if you like Kathy Reichs, and like those forensic details, Adelia Aguilar is an early, perhaps an early case Scarpetta. She's digging into the crime by looking at the bodies and trying to deduce what happened to these people, how did they die. Great, again, cast of characters. She's got a Muslim sort of bodyguard who comes over with her, only speaks Arabic, so he's an outsider. He understands English, though, and between the two of them they can communicate, so he hears things sometimes that people are saying because they don't think he understands English. People will say things around him that he can bring back to her. She's got servants, and this has got a love interest, too. If you like a little romance in your mysteries, Adelia has fallen in love in the first one with in the first book in the series, Mistress of the Art of Death. She's fallen in love with a well-to-do baron in England, a nobleman, and Rowley Picot, and their love interest waxes and wanes. She has a child by him, but by this story, Grave Goods, Rowley is now the Archbishop of St. Albans. So the love interest has a whole new aspect of it as he's taken up religious life, being appointed by the king. Of course, bishops back then were as much political as they were religious. But a great historical series set in the time of King Henry II. Moving a little further forward in time, historically, if you like Sherlock Holmes, there's lots of choices out there for people who've written various continuations of the Sherlock Holmes stories, but I don't think anybody has done it better than Laurie Our King. She hasn't tried to set her stories in the original time period of Holmes. She's taken Holmes into the future, into the later part of his life. In the first book in the series, this is the newest one, The Language of Bees, but the first book in the series, The Beekeeper's Apprentice, introduces Holmes to a young girl who's orphaned. She sort of latches onto him as a mentor in the art of detection, and by the later books in the series, they've married each other. So if you've never thought of Sherlock Holmes as actually being able to get married or having a good working relationship with a woman based on those early stories by Conan Doyle, I think Laurie Our King has taken and added a really interesting new feature to Sherlock Holmes. Mary Russell is his companion's name, and together the two of them solve mysteries that take them from England to the Middle East, around the time of World War I and afterwards. So great stories, interesting connections. She does a wonderful job of capturing the feel of the early Sherlock Holmes stories without just writing another version of them. So if you want to see what Sherlock Holmes might have turned out like had Conan Doyle taken him further into the future, try Laurie Our King. She's a wonderful one. We'll move a little further in. You know, we're in tough economic times right now, as all of you are no doubt aware, and sometimes it can be interesting to go back and read about those earlier tough economic times. And I think this series by Harold Adams, featuring Karl Wilcox as the detective, Booklist magazine, which does reviews for libraries and librarians, said, the Booklist reviewer said of this series, it's the best mystery series you've never heard of, and I can attest to that. This is a wonderful series set in the Depression in the 1920s and early 30s. Up in the northern midsection of the country, in the Dakotas and Minnesota, Wisconsin, that area. So a fascinating setting. Small towns, if you like those small town settings, you'll like the Harold Adams stories. Karl Wilcox is a fascinating character. He served in the Army. He served a bit of time in prison. He's worked in his folks' hotel in a small town up in that area, and he's now an itinerant sign painter. He travels from town to town, picking up some money by painting some signs, looking for the local women, seeing who's out there to date, and then also solving crimes. Again, as an outsider, he comes into these towns and he's often asked to take on something, a mystery that's been tormenting the people for years, and he as the outsider sees something different. He can take a new set of eyes to it. He doesn't have ties to the people. He doesn't worry about who's rich, who's poor. He really is seeking after the truth. He's handy with his hands, but he's also handy with his brains. He's a great, interesting detective character. And again, the setting in the Depression era is one you don't find too often. So a little bit, I guess it's historical now because we're talking about 70, 80 years ago, but these are great stories and I think offer us a lot to think about now as you can read about the lives of the people who were living through that first Great Depression. So maybe gives us a little bit of an insight into some things we might want to think about. So Harold Adams, Karl Wilcox series. Lead So I Can Follow is a later story. This one actually finds Harold on his honeymoon with his wife. So he does get married in the end. He gives up his wild ways and marries a woman who assists him in his detection. They're out on their honeymoon on a canoe trip, and they hear a body falling off a cliff. They go to investigate and see what's there. They find the body lying on the railroad tracks, pull it off so it doesn't get hit by a train. The person is dead. Of course, when the sheriff shows up, he suspects that they were involved, and it becomes incumbent upon them to investigate the crime in order to exonerate themselves. So it's a great story, good series. Another one with an interesting setting and an interesting lead character is Colin Cotterill's series that starts with The Coroner's Lunch. These are set in Laos during the Vietnam War period in the 60s and 70s. The Pathet Lao has taken over Laos. They've killed all the intellectuals. What that means? It means they've lost their coroner. So they don't have somebody to do that job. So what happens is they come to a physician who has managed to escape the purges of the intellectuals. His name is Dr. Siri Paibon, and they force him to become coroner in the town, to take on this idea of solving mysteries. It's a dark story. This was a dark time in the lives of the Laotian people, but he's a really sympathetic character. Again, if you like unusual settings with a unique character, a coroner approach, so it's got a little bit of that forensic side of things that you might enjoy if you like the Kathy Reichs, Patricia Cornwell sort of forensic science books. I think these have a lot to offer, but what captured for me most of these is the strong setting. If you know nothing, as I did, if you know nothing about really the lives of the people in Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia during that time, during the 60s and 70s, these are eye-opening books, fascinating books, and written by someone who has a real knowledge of the country. So again, well worth the try. I mentioned that Janet Evanovich has a book coming out. I think it's number 15 in her Numbers series that started off with One for the Money. It's something 15 or 15 something, no doubt. It's going to have a long holds list. All those Evanovich books do. So if you want a writer who writes a little bit like Janet Evanovich with a great funny, edgy character, you got to try Sarah Strohmeyer's Bubbles Yablonsky series. Bubbles is a hairdresser, but she has aspirations for better things. She wants to be an investigative journalist. She's not quite sure how to break into that, so she just does a lot of investigating. These are really funny stories. Like Evanovich, great secondary characters that add a lot to the humor of the stories, and I think that so they live in the town of Whoopee, Pennsylvania. So if you're looking for this sort of blue-collar feel to the stories, a blue-collar neighborhood, fascinating, fascinating mystery story, a good plot, but also really heavy on the characters and really heavy on the humor. I think you can tell, you know, by looking at the cover, if it's got a pair of leopard skin high heel shoes on it with red velvet lining, you know there's going to be an edge of humor, there's going to be an edge of romance to these stories as well. So if you like Janet Evanovich, definitely check out Bubbles Yablonsky in Sarah Strohmeyer's wonderful books. Those are just a few of the many, many, many crime books that are out there for reading. If you want to look at some of these lists of crime fiction that the library has put together, or lists of others, stories for summer reading, we've got a great romance list, a great thriller list, a great young adult list, as well as a great crime fiction list. If you go to the library's website, www.wrl.org/bookweb, and click on the summer reading link that's very prominently displayed in the middle of the page. You'll find these 4 lists. On that book web page, you'll find lots of other reading lists. Our new book lists are there, lots of other reading lists for different kinds of reading. You'll also find a link to our reading suggestion form. If you want to click on that and send that in, fill it out, and send it in, the librarians will create an annotated list of books you might like based on what you like to tell us. We've done over 600 of these lists for readers in the area and gotten a lot of great responses. So if you're sort of stuck on what to read, try some of our lists, try our Looking for a Good Book reading service, and we're always happy to help you at the reference desk here at the Williamsburg building or at the James City County Library up on Croker Road in Nord. So come and see us. Thanks a lot.